Welcome to the We Are VIP podcast. Each week, your host, Casey Hasten, Director of Recruiting at VIP, will bring you valuable insights from thought leaders, introduce you to incredible companies, and bring you tips for landing your dream job from our team of executive recruiters at VIP. And now, Casey Hasten.
Welcome to the We Are VIP podcast, a podcast devoted to adding value to your career or candidate search, brought to you by VIP. I'm your host, Casey Hasten. I'm an executive recruiter, director of recruiting with VIP, and your all-around hiring guru. And today on the show, I'd like to welcome Lisa Scott, CEO and founder of Intuitive Edge and author of M&A Plus, Amazon's #1 new release in its category. Lisa is a high-energy, seasoned entrepreneur, business strategist, people developer, and active California licensed attorney. Her background is also very multinational. She's lived and worked in many countries and is proficient in Mandarin Chinese. That was a shock to me. I did not know that. Thanks for joining us today, Lisa.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Mandarin Chinese.
Yes.
And do you speak it fluently still?
No, I'm not going to lie. I had the opportunity to practice a little bit with someone I just met recently.
Yeah.
And I could get through some conversation, but
that's a tough language.
Pretty rusty.
That's a tough language. So we had a speaker, there was also an international speaker at Success North Dallas a couple of months ago, and she was teaching English in Japan. And one of our members stood up and asked her a question in Japanese, and then she just rolled off into this Japanese. I'm like, I had no idea she could speak that language. That's amazing. I think that is so, I cannot speak a second language. I speak Texas and English, kind of. More right. Texas than English, you know? So thank you so much for joining us today. I think this is so exciting. And I love to tell the story about how we got connected. And I think ours is kind of a unique connection story. So you want to share with our audience how we got connected?
I actually met some folks at the VIP consulting group. I was introduced to them by someone, and I don't remember exactly who it was. And I was talking to them about, hey, I could maybe help you guys with your forum that you're in, maybe speak, because I'm trying to find other avenues where I can get more in touch with CFOs, because a lot of our customers that we work with the CFO. And they said, hey, you should be on our podcast. We got to get you in touch with Casey. And then I found out that all these other people that I know. And then, we might as well have already met. It's kind of funny it took this long, but...
Yeah, it was so interesting because we actually ran into each other. We'd had a Zoom call, and then we ended up running into each other at a gala. Women's
Business Council.
Yes, and that was so, and I'm like, wait a minute, you're coming on my podcast.
Right, that was hilarious.
That was a lot of fun, but
fun.
I love that it's such a small world, and it's so important that we remember that when we're dealing with people, that it is a small world, because you never know when that conversation is going to come back to either help you or hurt you. And so I'm actually speaking on that later tonight on an interview, which is going to be, I've got a really good personal story for that. So, but this is not about me. This is about you. So tell me a little bit about you, your journey, and, because I consider you a non-traditional when it comes to your career path. So tell us a little bit about how you got started.
How I got started with my job, my current career. I could start with that. So I worked in the corporate world. So first of all, let me just go back to law school. So I did graduate from law school, and there's a whole other story before I even got to law school. But I did graduate from law school, and I tried to work in some law firms, and I tried to do the traditional path, and it was really difficult for me to sort of fit in my personality to the way everything is set up, and I was just getting bored, and I'm like, I don't know what I'm going to do. I love the fact that I got a legal education, because it teaches you how to think and how to spot issues, and it comes in handy when you're trying to, strategize things, and, think really clearly. So the legal education itself was great. It's just the jobs that were presented to me didn't seem all that exciting to me. So I did actually start looking for something more exciting and a better fit for me from the beginning. So I did start working at a company where I was helping them manage their contracts, and I did not pass the bar yet, and they helped me put me through the bar and everything. So I did get my license to practice law, but I ended up doing everything in-house all the time. And so throughout my career, I found all these different gaps in the fact that, the legal departments in these companies are not always involved in the operations part of the company, and they have so much on their plate already. And the business units are always asking for more and asking for faster. So I'm like, well, there seems to be a gap, because the fact that I had a legal background and was able to manage a lot of documents and still work with the attorneys and understand kind of the legal issues that we needed to watch out for and make sure the company was covered for, it was just a gap that I saw, that I ended up creating a company based on that. So the first area that we got into was merger and acquisition transition. I did go through 2 of those when I was working at a company. The company had bought 2 different large scale operations where it involved transitioning procurement contracts over to ours, to the one company to another. And so I worked in that area, and it was very chaotic. No one ever knew what it did. There was no set process for it. It's a very specialized area where everyone's trying to figure out what to do and pull resources in to do it. And when I left that world, I basically it took a few years to hone in on what exactly it was I was offering, but I was able to do it, and I got a big contract that where we were able to help. Actually, it was Dell was our first customer.
Oh, wow.
Big customer, and we helped them separate RSA security from Dell. So that was our first large project that took a long time to get it, and it made us, from there, it made us create our infrastructure and our business, and then we were able to get a lot of projects after that.
That's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
So, all right. So tell us a little bit about Intuitive Edge and what sets it apart from other legal services, because you still kind of do legal services, right?
Yeah, we do. We have project attorneys. We call them project attorneys. So what we do is we create teams that are multidisciplinary. So they would include a project manager, project attorneys, and contract administration. And we also now have IT support and possibly other subject matter expertise as we need, depending on what we're doing. So it's really a full solution for an operational responsibility to manage contracts with the legal expertise, with somebody that can actually build bridges through the company, coordinate, and work with the legal departments. Because we do work with legal departments a lot, and we draft a lot of language, and we're often involved in negotiations of contracts.
So would you consider yourself an outsourced legal department or an add-on?
I would call it more of an add-on.
Okay.
And in addition to legal, we don't just focus on resolving legal issues or we don't do any legal representation. So it's not considered legal representation what we do. So it goes more into the business. So there's some overlap with legal, and there's some overlap with business operations.
Can you give us an example of what that would look like when you say there's an overlap? So what does that look like when you go into the business operations?
So, for example, a procurement department might hire us because they need to manage a certain set of contracts that they're receiving from a company that they're purchasing, for example. So we would work with the procurement department on setting up a process for that. And it's not only the legal department that needs to be involved in that. There's all kinds of departments. There's the finance department. There's the risk management department. There's going to be contracts related to HR. There's going to be contracts related to IT. So there's all these different coordination that needs to happen within the company. And so for us, that's what we do. We work with the entire company to push these contracts through, to get them through that are in compliance with, what the compliance regulations are and what their legal department wants us to do.
And I'm curious, do most companies not have someone that helps with that or that does all that coordination?
Yeah. So they do. There's a lot of roles. You can there's contract managers. There are category managers in procurement departments. There's a lot of roles all over the place. The problem that happens is which is why we're often involved in the M&A space, because That's a short period of time that needs a lot of work, that there aren't not enough existing people to do it. So that's kind of what we focus on helping companies do. And for example, if there's a spin-off, like you said, there may not be anybody to hand that function to. There's a spin-off, and they're building a new entity to take all of that new, business.
I can see where that would be a problem, and especially I think about, especially when you have a spinoff, because you need all of this, people inventory. But sometimes when you have a spinoff, you start losing a lot of people too, because they get nervous.
Yeah.
They don't know what's going to happen.
That happens a lot.
Or even if you're
Yeah.
acquired, same thing. People, I just talked to a candidate today. It's exactly why they're leaving the company selling. And
Exactly.
there's a whole lot of people that are thinking the same thing. They all think they're alone and
Yeah.
unique, but I'm telling you, I'm hearing from all of them in that
Right.
department that they're all worried because the company's selling. So I can see where your expertise would become very valuable at that point in time.
Yeah, and we've developed the expertise to go into this chaotic and transitional situation and help, solve problems within a kind of a mess, simplify the mess or organize a mess. And we're used to that. That's what we do.
Something tells me you kind of thrive on messes.
Well, I thrive on messes. I don't know about that. Yes, I would say throughout my career, like one of my first jobs, I remember, I saw all these contracts, and all I did was go around and gather all the contracts and put them on a list and put some information about each contract. It was a small company that I first worked at. And there was about, I don't even want to say, there was like 50 vendors. That's it. But they weren't organized in any fashion. I'm like, I wonder, if I put everything on a spreadsheet, if that would make sense. And so I did, and I showed it to the CEO, the president of that company. He's like, oh my God, that's so great. We actually now know that we have all these contracts and when they're expiring, and they didn't know that before, and they thought it was great. And it's just a simple exercise, but a lot of companies actually lose track of their contracts so easily because it's a decentralized, and it's people forget, they put things in drawers, and they may even have things that aren't signed, or terms that exist that they don't even realize that they need to extend, or they can't get out of contracts because the termination clauses are a certain way.
Can I tell you something that I did recently? Because this doesn't just happen in business; it happens in life too, right? So I'm embarrassed about this, but I'm going to share it. So I recently engaged with a company. It was funny because the company that they hired me to come speak and do a training, but at the same time they also help people to negotiate their electricity and all that kind of stuff. And my electricity, I thought I was just like everybody else, like the rate was going through the roof. And they come back and they're like, "Good news, we're going to cut your electricity in half." And I'm like, "Yes! Why have I been paying so much?" And they're like, "Did you remember to renew your electricity bill or your electricity company?" No. For over a year, I had been paying like the top rate because I had not renewed my contract. I need a you in my life.
Exactly. So, I mean, imagine that on the scale of a company. They have electric bills too.
Yeah.
Right? They have the same contracts.
That's
so
crazy.
It's a good example. And there's all kinds of...
And that was a 50% savings. Boom, like that.
Yeah.
So yes, I can see exactly where that would, impact the bottom line of a company and how important this is. But from what I understand, the way that you do it and the services you offer, you're able to do it in a more cost-effective way. So tell us, how do you do that? How do you make it more cost-effective?
Well, because we make reason out of the mess. So we create a playbook. We look at everything. We look at everything that exists, which is probably sometimes the first time a company ever does that, is just look at everything and see what exists. And it doesn't take that long to do that, really. And then what we do is, if we know if we know what the business goal is, we'll create a playbook based on that goal. And the playbook basically shows everything that exists, all the categories of things, and what needs to be done with each thing. And during the execution, if this is the first, so this would be the first ask, and if we don't get that, then there's a fallback position. If we don't get that, it's already written, it's already established. And I don't know if you're going to ask me about the OASIS cycle, but the OASIS cycle is a good way to explain.
That was actually the next thing I wanted to, because I think that's interesting, because you definitely it was your visionary perspective that led to this development of the Oasis cycle. So please continue.
So,
what is this?
So the Oasis cycle just explains it all in 5 words: organize, analyze, standardize, institutionalize, and then synergize. So I was to standardize. So creating the playbook and templates and all the things that you're going to need to run the project. And then institutionalize means, making sure everybody knows their piece in the process. Now, during the standardization process, usually there's multiple people involved in creating that, so they probably already know. But institutionalizing that process is an important step, because that's making sure that everybody understands their piece, and you're not going to have to explain to people why you're doing something, in the middle of it, and then it's going to make things less efficient. And then synergize is actually, synergize is a big word, and it means a lot of things. And part of it is, the way that we provide our service, the unique method that we have, and it has a lot to do with our culture. So it's basically how we get people to do what they need to do. How do we manage the chaos? How do we manage the fact that, there's people that want to leave the company? We call it soft touch, or managing those relationships. And it's actually not even just with our client, it's also with the third party. So like if one of our clients has a contract with, say, Microsoft or Amazon, it's also managing with them, because if they have a productive relationship with their vendors, it's going to be easier conversations, and you're going to be able to get a response, and you're going to be able to get a conversation about what you need and what you don't need, and that leads to reduced costs or efficiency. So all of those things matter. So our culture is very much centered on building relationships, lasting relationships, and we call it soft touch internally, about how we approach a situation.
Well, I think that that's so important, that you have that cognizance that it's not just the people in the company, but you've got to, like the electricity company, you've got to be able to talk to them and manage that relationship. And I keep taking it down to a very granular level, but I think it's important to kind of grasp the concept on a bigger level, is to understand that. And so I think that that's so important. And I did this myself when I finally negotiated I didn't negotiate, pardon me, I hired somebody to negotiate for me, but it was very interesting the way that they dealt with me and I dealt with them. So I can see where that would be important. All right, so what I'm curious about, because I have a very non-traditional career path too. And, and a lot of people are like, how did you make that leap? And I'm like, God, it was so natural. It's where I should have been all along. But I'm curious with you, because you have a non-traditional career path as well after you got your law degree. And what advice would you give to someone like me, or like anyone that is currently, wants to go this route? Like, I just graduated with my accounting degree. Everybody says I need to go into accounting. I don't want to do that. What advice would you give them to not follow the norm?
Yeah, it's really actually simple. It's not that difficult. It's just there's so many things in society that makes you think that you shouldn't be doing that. But it's basically just follow your passion in your heart and being really brave about it. And even if it's just a little bit brave, being outside your comfort zone is actually a good thing. It's always a good thing. It always ends up being a good thing. So, that's what I would say to people. And, I have said that to people, and I get responses like, well, what are you going to do? Or what? Well, I have followed my passion. Okay. When I graduated from, I was in high school, I graduated. I all of a sudden wanted to learn Chinese. So I started taking Chinese. So then I'm like, well, I'm not gonna be able to learn Chinese very well if I don't go to China. So then I went to China, and then, from China, I was like, man, I want to go to a university that I can take advanced Chinese classes, because now I'm really good at Chinese and I want to do it. So I ended up going to the University of Michigan, because they were one of the only universities at the time that had it. So I'm like, okay, so I go there, and I studied anthropology and Chinese language, because I was really interested in just learning about the world in general. And then after that, I was like, well, there's this really cool job opportunity in Japan teaching English. So I just decided I'm going to do that, because then I can learn about another country besides China, and still be in Asia. And I was still on this Asian thing where I wanted to learn all about Asia and the history. And so I spent 2 years in China in Japan teaching English.
Did you learn Japan?
It was
Japanese
all based
too?
on my. It was just based on what was pulling me.
Yeah.
It pulls you. I don't know what it is. I don't know what was going to happen or what career I was going to do. But at some point in Japan, when I was teaching English, I said, well, I'm going to apply to law school now.
Because that's the obvious next step.
Yeah, that's the obvious next step. And one of the reasons you're going to laugh at this, but one of the reasons that I wanted to go to law school is because all my life growing up, people said I was dumb. And
No
I was
way.
like, because I question things, I don't have answers for everything, and I don't act like I know everything. I mean, I was kind of, this personality that I have is sort of like that, right? And so, I got called airhead. I'm sorry, I shouldn't say dumb. It was airhead. She's an airhead. You're such an airhead.
What?
Ha, ha, ha. And
That is so hard for me
guess
to
what?
believe.
After I graduated law school, no one ever said that. I didn't hear that word again. Not one time.
People can be so mean.
Exactly. So I went into law school knowing I might not be a lawyer. I might not be a traditional lawyer, but I just wanted to go and do it and pass the bar and do all that stuff. And it was really hard for me at first because, I didn't have, my background made it maybe a little bit difficult, but I just kept doing it. Like my first semester in law school, I didn't do very well. And then after that, I just kept trying, and I ended up getting the highest grade in the hardest law class. Conflicts of law. That's like considered one of the hardest. And I got the highest grade in the class, and I got an award for it. So I'm kind of like that. I'm like, it's like I try, and then all of a sudden I get really good at something, even though I sucked at it in the beginning. I kind of, I've done that many times, and I still suck at a lot of things. But
you're not afraid to try.
But that's the point. I'm saying be brave. Just kind of be brave about what you're doing and just do it, right?
I love that so much because you took what so many people would have held on to as a limiting belief, like you're an airhead, and they would have internalized that, and then their brain would have looked to prove to them that they were doing that. And you're like, no, you don't get to define me. I'm going to define myself, and I'm going to prove to you, not that you had to prove to them, maybe you prove to yourself that you're not an airhead, because you have a law degree now. So you're one of those females that we want to follow. I think that's amazing, and I think so much, and I love how you explain that about, being pulled. And so many people, when they're being pulled towards their passion, they're so afraid of all the obstacles around them that they almost cut the cord, and they don't let them be pulled. And I think that if we will allow ourselves to be pulled in the direction that we most naturally want to go in, that's where we're going to find happiness. So
yeah, I mean, I've been pretty happy my entire life. I mean, I don't feel like I regret, I don't have any regrets actually. And I never had a plan, a strong plan. I'm not gonna say there's not a plan. I mean, there's things you have to do that you don't like doing. You have to take tests, but it's still, there's this pull and a passion, and it's not necessarily in the standard plan that kind of society has or your parents have for you or whatever.
I think that's very true that, and that's another thing that I want to really encourage people, especially as you're starting out in your career, is that go really figure out what you are passionate about, not what your parents are passionate about. Because so many times as parents, we want to live out our own dreams that we didn't get to accomplish through our children.
Yeah.
And that puts the child in a place where, as they grow up, they're not happy. And I'm not going to say that my parents did that to me, but, I got stuck in a career for 20 years that I was absolutely not aligned with. And finally getting out of it's what woke me up and set me free and set me on my passion path. And so I think that's really important. So, all right, I want you to tell me a little bit about your book. We've got a copy of it here, M&A Plus. If we can see the copy of the book. There we go. M&A Plus. So how did you come up with the name? Tell us what it's about. I mean, and it's a #1 bestseller in its category, right?
Yeah, I don't know if it is now, but it was.
Well,
for a while.
You can't stay #1 forever.
I know.
You got to share the spotlight a little bit.
Right,
But
exactly.
still, at one time it was. So tell us about what inspired you to write this and what it's about, what we can learn if we read this book.
Yeah, well, it was super cool to be able to, kind of think of a concept of a company and then kind of work toward what you think is going to work, and then it actually works. And then it actually evolves. So the book is sort of based on the service that we provide that has evolved the most, and that the team was able to sort of improve and create as a product. It's like a product now that we can sell, like a service product. So to be able to go from sort of zero to that is actually pretty amazing. So, I mean, a lot of business owners, write books about if they have like a unique niche or something, and I just wanted to kind of share that in the book. But the book is kind of cool because I didn't want to make it like a boring, I don't want to say every book is boring. I didn't want it to be a boring business book about a process. Okay.
Right.
Processes can be very boring to read. So each chapter is, there's a quote, and you could actually go through and just read the quotes. And there's only 10 chapters, and it's a beautiful book. It's all in color. And, the design of the book was really important because I wanted it to feel like our brand, right?
Yeah.
So,
very simple, right?
Exactly. So it's short. It's only 100 pages, and it does talk a lot about my past and my why I wrote it and what I did to get there, basically. So there's a lot of kind of autobiography especially in the beginning.
So
and a lot of people that are not in business or in M&A have read it, and they said, "Oh, that's really interesting." It's not so over their head, right? You would think a lot of specialized business books might be over people's head if they're not in it, but this, and people have commented about the fact that oh, now I understand how things work in business, right?
Yeah. I like this. The fantasy of forever gets in the way of planning for tomorrow. Mm-hmm. So I'm a big quote person, so I'm going to really enjoy looking at the quotes and reading the book. So, all right. So I have one more question for you. So I know, and we talked about this earlier, you being proficient in Mandarin Chinese, which I'm so impressed because I know that's not an easy language to, number one, learn, number two, speak, right? And are you, can you read and write?
I was very fluent in reading and writing when I graduated from college.
That's incredible.
I mean, I studied it day in and day out for 5 years straight. I mean, It was just, you just practice and practice. And I was, speaking all the time. I was dreaming in Chinese. I was thinking in Chinese all day because it was just, I might as well just been Chinese, actually.
Well, how do you think this has aided your professional development?
I mean, I think it's actually, that's a really deep question because, like I just said, if it's in your head that much, it tends to help you understand different perspectives. I mean, the Chinese language is way different than English. I mean, I would say any language is different from each other. But the way that they say things, the way that the pictures in the characters, it gives you beyond a different perspective. It's just a way to think different. I mean, you think different even about things. So it's not even just about a culture perspective. It's your brain gets used to thinking in a different language. I mean, think about it, a different language. And you could compare it to is it French that has the masculine and feminine? Like if you were bilingual in French and English, right? Well, in French, you're thinking of everything in masculine and feminine. In English, you're not, right? So it's like your brain is basically just working different completely.
And I think that's a good thing. I'm absolutely fascinated by the brain and by NLP. In fact, that's going to be my next certification, just because I'm so fascinated about how we can rewire our brains. But it sounds to me like what you're saying is that not only are you rewiring your brain when you do that, you're expanding the capacity of use of your brain.
I think so, for sure. Yeah.
And I think that's amazing. Yeah. So what's one piece of advice that you would give to someone that, and you've already answered about the non-traditional, but just in general, let's just say I'm going down a traditional career path. What is the best piece of advice that you would give to someone that's just starting out?
I mean, I would say always be open-minded and always stay curious. Always be curious. Don't ever let that go, because just always go back to your childhood, how curious you were. Because there's so many things going on in the world and so many opportunities, and you're not going to notice or see it if you're not curious enough. right?
That is so beautiful. Is that one of your quotes in the book?
No, I don't think so.
I think curiosity
add
is
it.
key.
Yeah.
You should. That's because that's important advice. And again, don't have your head so far down that you do miss those opportunities when they come your way.
Yeah.
You've got to be open to them, and you got to be looking for them always.
Yeah,
and that's where the curiosity comes in.
And I've been called an airhead because I'm curious. And like, I'll be curious, like, I wonder why he said that. Well, duh. Everyone else is like, well, duh, it's because this. It's like, well, I don't know. Maybe not.
Yeah,
I mean, that's just, you're just being curious. So, I mean, I would give that advice, and I give it to my daughter, actually. I told her, you better not, if she's hanging out with somebody who's closed-minded, I'll be like, you better not lose your curiosity. You're hanging out with someone that isn't very curious, and I don't want you to lose your curiosity. I tell her that.
I like how you phrase that. They're not very curious. I'm not comfortable with you hanging out with people that aren't very curious.
Right?
That's pretty awesome. Okay, well, I'm curious about something. So I have some VIP questions for you, and I'm curious to see how you're going to answer them with your whole curious self. All right, so my first question. If you were chosen to be one of the first colonists on Mars, what 3 things or people would you bring with you?
Yeah, so probably a handyman. I thought a handyman.
Okay.
I mean, I have my house, right? And handyman can do a lot of different things. They can help do everything. The other one is person or tool, right?
You can bring
Anything.
3 things
Three
or
things
3
or
persons
person.
or mix it up.
Okay, I thought another thing to bring in, this is kind of an obvious one, but like food or seeds or water. I don't know. Don't you need that? Like, that's a basic thing, right? And then maybe the other one would be like a psychiatrist or I mean,
in case you get too curious.
Well, I mean, imagine it's what it would do to your psychology being the first colonist on Mars. I mean, how do you get through the mental part of it?
Do you think we'll see that in our lifetime?
Maybe not. Well, I don't know. Maybe people will be on Mars, but I don't know about colonizing. Didn't you say colonizing?
Yes. Yes. I'm curious if we'll see people on Mars.
Ask Elon Musk. He thinks we are. So.
I know. He was so excited that his rocket blew up the other day. I was like, okay. He's like, this was a huge win.
Failure is a step to success.
It
right?
is a step to success.
The next step to success.
So, all right. So what is one thing you do each morning to set your day up for success?
Okay, this one's really simple. The only thing that I do is go outside every morning. I don't really do anything spectacular. I don't take a cold shower. I don't exercise in the morning. Sometimes, but it's not like a normal thing to do. I literally just go outside.
Do you go outside barefooted?
Well, I probably put my sandals on, but I have bare feet. But not necessarily. Sometimes.
It's just curious because I mean, you've heard of the technique of grounding, right?
Yeah.
So I was just curious if maybe you went outside to ground and you just didn't want to say it.
If I get up in the morning and I'm tired, if I go outside, it makes me wake up.
It energizes. There's electrical energy that comes from the earth. It's so
and
important.
it doesn't have to be a long time. It could be 5 minutes.
Yeah, exactly. I encourage everybody to read up on
and then
grounding.
I start thinking about, I got to do this, I got to do that, and then
then you're off.
Then I'm off, but I'm awake.
We need to talk about your morning.
All
right. My final question: if your life's work was being summarized in a news article, what would the headline be?
I think it would be she always follows her passion, but she never knows where it's going to end up.
I think that summarizes you perfectly. I think that's perfect. Just the short amount of time that I've gotten to know you, I would totally agree with that title. So how do people find you if they want to get in touch with you?
Well, my email is lisa@in2edge.com. Our website is in2edge.com, in2edge.com.
And we'll have all this in the show notes.
All of my contact information is on there also.
And are you very active on LinkedIn?
I am.
I know that's where a lot of our users go, so they can reach out to you.
So I'm easily findable on LinkedIn, and then the book, of course, is on Amazon. If you type in M&A plus Lisa Scott, it comes up.
Congratulations on the book. That's huge. So, well, I have thoroughly enjoyed our time together here today, and I just have one last thing to say to you. You are a VIP.
Thank you.
And that's a wrap for today. Join us next week here on the We Are VIP podcast. We'd love to know how we can help you be a VIP.
To find out more, log on to wearevip.com.